Hi, welcome viewers from around the world and all the ships at sea. Welcome to the first annual World Tobacco Harm Reduction Day broadcast. It's not coincidental that we're holding this broadcast on the same day that No Tobacco Day is being celebrated by the CDC and the anti-all tobacco extremists. What we plan to do is offer common sense approaches and honest discussion. We all know that cigarettes are bad. Cigarettes are deadly. Over 1 billion people on the planet smoke them. 42 million people in America, 150 million in the EU alone. And government and business seems to be going out of their way to keep those numbers up as much as possible while squashing any safer alternative. Because the real key here is nicotine. Nicotine is not cancerous. It's not a carcinogen. It's actually a stimulant to the cardiovascular system. It's as dangerous as caffeine, though much, much more addictive along the lines of heroin. And that's why I find it ironic that CDC and others will launch billion-dollar programs or multi-million-dollar programs on needle exchanges for heroin addicts, rehab, counseling, halfway houses. But when it comes to helping smokers either get off of nicotine or get off to a safer nicotine alternative, they offer nothing concrete. It's quit or die, as Chad characterizes it. The few pharmaceutical alternatives out there, which strangely are legal, are endorsed and are nicotine, are transdermal patches and gum, and the rather dangerous prescription medication called Chantix or Champix, which has been known to lead to depression in non-depressed people and in suicide to people who are non-suicidal. Those are acceptable options. Swedish snus, vaping, not acceptable options. So to kind of contrast what we plan to show you tonight, we're going to show you a little clip here of what the CDC put together for No Tobacco Day. Matt, why don't you introduce everyone?
So we have a great panel here today. Really happy to talk to all these guys here on what's going on. So today we have Chad Jones from Snoopy.com, writer and reviewer. We have Larry Waters from SnusCENTRAL.org. He's writer and editor of Snus Central. Great insight there. And Christopher Nash from GoSmokeless.org. He is a co-founder and editor. And we also have James Martin and Dane Smith from Inside Vaping. And I am Matt Campbell, and I do the video production over at Snus Central's YouTube channel. So this is a great panel. Very excited to talk to everybody about what's going on. And let's get this thing rolling here.
So where do you want to start with on the introductions? I guess if we're going clockwise, Larry, I don't know. Larry, you want to start off here?
I discovered Swedish snus, ironically, through Camel, whose cigarettes I smoked for about 40 years. I was looking for a way to stop smoking. It was too inconvenient. It was professionally not good to be walking into a board meeting smelling of tobacco smoke. And this was 2007. I got a coupon in the mail from Camel for something called Camel Snus. So I bought a can and I said, well, maybe, I don't know. let me look it up and see if I could find it cheaper on the internet, at least. And all of a sudden, hundreds of things about Swedish snus popped up, links, most of them dead, most of them in Swedish, information all over the place. And it took me about 6 weeks to pull it all together. And once I understood what Swedish snus offered, I was fortunate enough to have a tobacco store 5 minutes from my home that sold General Snus. I took that first portion, and it was like going from dog food with the camel snus to filet mignon. I was able to transition from cigarettes to all Swedish snus in a week. And I had it planned out. I had my 2-pack sitting there for each day, but I haven't had a cigarette since, and I really haven't wanted one, which is to me amazing, because I've quit many times in the past, and it lasts varying lengths of time. Hypnosis got me through a few years, actually, but when that stress comes in, or that realization that I'm having my morning coffee but I'm not smoking, or I'm having dessert and I'm not smoking, that just is such a buzz in the back of your brain all the time, that if the stress situation is enough, and I was in a high-stress profession, you just wanted to shut that voice up. And I am firmly convinced, with my family's health history, that I would not be here today if I had not made the Swedish snus, or the switch to Swedish snus in 2007. So I thank God for Sweden and for Swedish snus.
Matt?
Yep. Well, I used to be a pipe smoker for a number of years, pipes and cigars. And I really like the complexity and flavors there, you know, the hand-to-mouth motion, and just the joy of the rituals of pipe smoking in general. From there, I progressed onto actually vaping, and I vaped for a little while there. And it still wasn't, I mean, it was a great alternative, a great option, but for me personally, it wasn't quite what I was looking for. And then a few years later, I tried Swedish snus for the first time and did a lot of research on it, found a lot of great articles from Swedish Match, and popped the first portion in, and it was like nothing I've ever had before. The tobacco flavor was there. You know, the nicotine doesn't hurt either, but it was more of that flavor profile that I was looking for that I wasn't really finding in a lot of vaping things. And Swedish snus really gave me that great flavor that I was looking for.
All right, I guess that's me next. I had back in 2009, I was getting custody of my daughter, and I was a smoker at the time, and I didn't want her to be around the smoke I was around, and also I was working in the restaurant at the time, which made it virtually impossible to smoke. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna find something else. I found Swedish snus after coming over from Camel Snus like everybody else, and I found it through SnusCENTRAL was the first website I actually found. And from there, it was history. I quit smoking within a week after switching to Swedish snus when nothing else would work for me. Chantix, the patch, the gum, nothing else worked. So I made the switch. Shortly after that, I started Snoopy.com, and I've been writing about snus and reviewing snus ever since.
I guess it's going to me.
Yep.
So back in probably about 2008, I was an occasional smoker, cigarette smoker, occasional cigars, a constant hookah smoker, every day, all the time, and there's a dog attacking me. And so...
what a photo bomber.
So I was at actually a NASCAR race, and they had the camel tent there, and they were giving out samples of, obviously, cigarettes and the camel snus. They had the frost, and I think it was the mellow at the time. And I tried it, and I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. There's nicotine, and I can get my nicotine when I'm not, at home, or I don't have to have a cigarette, or I don't have to smoke a cigar or whatever. I can just have nicotine. So I thought it was very interesting. So I went online, and like I do for everything, I researched it. I wanted to know what snus was. And I found a bunch of information. I found a lot of stuff from SnusCENTRAL and other places. I made my first 2 orders was 2 different sites. One was SnusCENTRAL, the other was Get Snus, which I think now has been bought out and used to be actually owned by Swedish Match itself. And so I started buying from there. I remember the first time I got some portions and I tried it, and it was like overwhelming, and I didn't know what it was, so I kind of freaked out. And then a couple days into it, I realized this is really good, and I realized I wasn't trying to stop smoking hookah, and but I noticed about a month in, I was almost not smoking hookah at all, and I've gotten to the point where I don't think I've smoked hookah really in years now, and it's just been like a whole journey for me. And then I don't remember how long ago, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was asked to start reviewing snus for YouTube, so I started doing that, and it's kind of all went from there. And me and Chad opened Go Smokeless about 3 years, or 4 years ago now, and it's been an adventure and a journey, and Bentley wants to get in on this, but it's been a lot of fun, and I enjoy snus, and I started vaping probably about 3 years ago, and I enjoy that as well, and to supplement my nicotine, I guess you can say. And that's about it for me.
So I'm James. Chris's dog, for the uninitiated, does have an Instagram account apparently, because it's just too damn cute.
It does have an Instagram.
So my story is a little bit different. I smoked for years, and I preferred DJ Sampuerna extra cigarettes and some very hazardous imported cigarettes that they're basically Kretek cigarettes, so they're clove, but had a lot of tar in them, and basically at one point my throat started bleeding after prolonged use. I went to the doctor, and he told me I had to discontinue smoking them. So I was looking for options, and I ran across a Grim Green video at that point. This is, I don't know, it's got to be close to 3.5, 4 years ago at this point. And I started vaping. I picked it up to try and leave behind smoking. And it worked. I really didn't have the urge to go back to smoking combustible cigarettes after that point. But what happened is, over the last few years, what's become more commonplace is lower nicotine juices. I mean, first we were doing 12, and then 6, and now 3 has become the norm. And what I noticed was that I was vaping an incredibly large amount of e-liquid. I'm talking maybe anywhere between 15 to 25 mils per day, which is a little bit on the excessive side. And I needed the nicotine. What I had basically done, I had cut myself back too quickly, and I still had that urge to, that I needed more nicotine. But vaping high nic juice just wasn't doing it for me. So I found out about SnusCENTRAL and watched a couple of Chad's videos. Actually, he was one of the first people that I watched on the subject, and then I just started trying snus, and now I got to say I love it. It's a very, very consistent delivery. It's a slow delivery because the product goes through, especially with the Swedish Match product, it goes through a GothiaTech process, which I know we're going to talk to you guys about a little bit later on in the show. This is not an infomercial for snus. This is just kind of dispelling some of the myths about smokeless products, as well as some of the myths about vaping. I believe they both hold a valuable place, and as advocates for tobacco harm reduction in many forms, I support both. I know CASA does as well. If you go check out CASA's website, they have mention of Swedish Match's application and other things. I'm not going to wax long-winded here, although I think I already have, but basically there's room for both products. And obviously for those of you who have a hand habit, or you enjoy inhalation and exhalation of some sort of vapor or smoke, Vaping might work for somebody like that. It may work better than snus. For myself, I wanted the tobacco flavor, but I didn't want the combustible and the tars and the toxins, which is why I love snus. Plus, it's very discreet. And that's one thing I can say for vaping. Unless you're very good at stealth vaping, it's not necessarily the most discreet form of tobacco harm reduction. It is excellent, however. So that's it for me. Dane?
Thank you, Mr. Martin. My story starts a long time ago. I was a smoker ever since the age of right about 10. And I enjoyed it. I always enjoyed it. I didn't want to quit. I loved it. I am also a cancer survivor. For 5 years, I fought non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, was very, very sick for a very long time, and knew that I was supremely addicted to nicotine and tobacco as I would smoke cigarettes in between therapy sessions at the hospital. So I knew I liked it. I really didn't want to quit. I had heard about 5 years ago about an electronic cigarette. I was very, very skeptical. I tend to be that way. And I didn't think much about it, but through the urging of friends and opportunity, really, I picked one up and tried it and thought, this just might work. And I used it for a while. It worked pretty well. I never smoked again after that. And really, that was the start of it. James and I found snus right about at the same time. James had talked about it with me once, and I said, well, that's actually worth a shot. And I've been using snus a lot ever since, and I think it's a great approach. It's a great approach for a couple of reasons. I've been a tobacco harm reduction advocate now for a few years. I've been on the legislative steps in a few states and talked to a lot of lawmakers. And I truly believe we are very lucky at this point in the industry of tobacco harm reduction. And we're lucky from the standpoint that we have a two-pronged approach to be very, very successful at quitting traditional tobacco while reducing immensely and almost completely the amount of harm that's done to our bodies. And that two-pronged approach is really important to me because, as James had stated, where you can't vape, you can certainly snus. And right. I think it's great. I think if people had known about these things, especially me, even when I started, that two-pronged approach would be incredibly, incredibly effective at quitting traditional tobacco. And James and I have become kind of mini evangelists for snus in a lot of ways. And I know we mention it at vape meets and things like that. I know I do because I'm like, no, really, it really works. I'm serious. You should try it. And we do that to just about everybody we know, probably ad nauseum to some folks. I think some folks are probably sick of us talking about snus as much as we do. But we are very lucky. And finding Chad was really like finding Grim Green for me. The information that Chad puts out on Snoopy.com is extensive. Not only is it extensive, it's complete and it's direct from the source. And I can tell you, James and I appreciated it immensely because when we first did a snus show on Inside Vaping, almost everything we needed was right there, which made it very, very easy for us. And we read everything we could. I mean, we digested everything we could possibly find on snoozing. We were watching videos on YouTube together at times going, oh, this is really great. This is really great. Somebody needs to know about this. And that's why we started to do that. But we're very, very happy to be here. We jumped at the opportunity to be on this broadcast because tobacco harm reduction is definitely something that needs to be moved and pushed forward across platforms. I think vaping is doing a great job. I think snus is doing a great job. And I think all of those different factions together to push this movement forward will do an immense amount of help.
Well said. I believe we've got a video to play too. This is a harm reduction video to kind of explain the concept of harm reduction. So let me go ahead and bring this up.
The World Health Organization estimates that there are currently 1 billion smokers across the globe, and that by 2050, this number could increase to 2.2 billion. Despite the well-known health risks and pressure to quit, millions of adults choose to smoke. It's time to look at alternatives. A new, more realistic and progressive route is needed. One where adult smokers looking to reduce the amount they smoke, or quit, are given a choice of less risky products, such as e-cigarettes. This approach is what we, and many scientists, refer to as tobacco harm reduction, and we believe that offering adult smokers the freedom to choose is the key to its success. Our knowledge of smokers' wants and needs means we understand them as consumers and can help establish and grow the use of less risky alternatives. As such, we believe we can and should be a part of the debate and the solution. We are committed to the concept of tobacco harm reduction, already investing over £170 million per year in research and development, enabling us to offer an expanding range of less risky tobacco and nicotine products. However, for this to work, governments and the public health community need to embrace this concept and these products as a realistic alternative to today's failing approaches. We welcome the opportunity to collaborate on making the concept of tobacco harm reduction a reality, a real alternative that provides a practical and pragmatic approach for governments seeking to reduce tobacco use.
So I'm sure there's a few people, at least on the vaping side. I know we've got a couple listeners who are viewing a live broadcast right now. Mm-hmm. At least on the vaping side of things, there's a few people who saw British American Tobacco and immediately thought, they just did a double take at that point. The truth is, and Larry, I don't know whether you'd agree with this or not, I think Big Tobacco realizes that for the viability of, basically for their future relevance, they have to at least acknowledge the fact that e-cigarettes are a viable market sector. And I believe they're putting some money into this, they're putting some research into this, and obviously they're already invested in smokeless products as well. But that's
I would agree. I totally agree with you. The handwriting's been on the wall for a long time, and eventually cigarettes are going to become either so highly taxed, so hard to get, or simply banned, that obviously these companies want to keep a revenue stream going. And they've embraced vapor. They started experimenting with snus in 2006. That was Camel, Reynolds. They had it made by BAT in overseas and shipped back. Didn't go over so well. They went to the modern so-called Camel snus, and they invested a lot of money in that, and it didn't. They have a large market share in the U.S., but the U.S. market share is minuscule because it's not cultural with us. Sure. In Sweden, 1 in 9 Swedes use snus. Sweden has the lowest rates of lung cancer, throat cancer, colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, mouth cancer of any EU nation. Yet the EU continues to ban snus, except for in Sweden. It's frustrating, but the Big Tobacco is nothing except foreseeing for profits. And they know where the market's going to be in 5-10 years, and they're actively jumping on board now. I don't approve of some of their methods, but they're definitely involved.
All right, so I'm gonna jump in here, and speaking on the snus side of things, I do want to go over a couple of numbers that are pretty relevant when it comes to this discussion, because at the end of the day, that's one thing that you can look at and say, this is a proven track record for what snus is and what snus has done and what snus can do. So, in the U.S., there's an estimated 443,000 people who die yearly due to smoking-related causes. But as Larry mentioned earlier, in the U.S., there's 42 million people addicted to smoking. Now, out of those 42 million people who are addicted to smoking, 70% on average of those people who are addicted want to quit smoking. Now, when you look at that number of people that want to quit, how they're going to quit, and what works and what doesn't work, tobaccoharmreduction.org, which is a great website for figures, they've shown that NRTs, nicotine replacement therapies, have a 90% failure rate.
92.
Yeah.
92, okay. But when you look at Swedish snus, 71% of people are able to completely quit smoking by switching to Swedish snus. That's people with a background of snus usage. People without a background of snus usage are 54% are able to completely quit by switching to Swedish snus, which is still higher than some of the other figures that have been thrown around for NRTs. Now, what's interesting whenever you look at World No Tobacco Day is that it's a World Health Organization function. This is something that they put on every year and they advocate for. But what's interesting is that Sweden, in 1997, they became the first country to reach the World Health Organization's goal of having a less than 20% population of adult smokers. But yet they have a high amount of tobacco consumption because a lot of people there use snus. So it's interesting that even though they advocate for not smoking and for not being a smoking country, they completely ignore the facts and the figures when it comes to Swedish snus. People who have reached their goal of not being smokers, but yet completely ignoring Swedish snus. So as we've mentioned before, when it comes to harm reduction, this isn't harm elimination. Swedish snus
Right.
is addictive, and anything that's addictive is naturally viewed as being unnatural. But this is harm reduction. It's not harm elimination. And Swedish snus has been proven through numerous studies. It's been studied to death what it can do and what it's done for people. We're examples of that ourselves. And, the numbers and the stats speak for themselves. It's very easy to see what Swedish snus can do. And, this is why we're doing this, is because people need to know about this stuff. There needs to be more awareness about harm-reduced alternatives, because brushing it under the rug and ignoring it isn't going to help anything. We're dooming people by saying quit or die. If you can't quit by our methods, die. That's what they're saying to us and to other people. I've lost family members, like many of you viewing have, to smoking-related diseases. So this is why we're embracing this. This is why we're starting doing this year, and why so many of us fight every single day, every single year to continue to spread awareness. With that being said, we do have a video that we want to show you about the GothiaTech standard. And just a little background on that before we launch into it. It's the standard of how Swedish snus is made. And it's a pretty interesting video. Check it out, and it's going to show you a little bit of background about GothiaTech.
By Swedish Match.
By Swedish Match.
This way.
Okay, let me see if I can load this. That one is not working for some reason. I'm going to have to try to wonder if the location changed on it.
Technical difficulties.
That's right.
While you're technically having technical difficulties, Swedish snus came under the regulation of the Swedish version of the FDA, the Food Products Administration, in 1970. So that's 45 years that the ingredients, the production methods of any snus made in Sweden must match their standards, food product standards, or they're not allowed to be sold. The tracking of snus users, their health risks, their disease levels or lack thereof compared to smokers has been tracked. Swedish snus is 99%, and I'm comfortable saying that, less harmful to a smoker than cigarettes are.
I think that's a fair percentage.
And I'm sorry, you say something, Chad?
I think that's a fair percentage. I agree.
I'm hearing feedback from somebody.
Yeah, somebody's looping.
Yep.
Somebody has it on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, you might have to mute whoever is not muted.
Nash sounded like my grandpa there for a minute. He's like, "It's on the YouTube."
It's on the YouTubes. All right, I have.
You're trying to say I'm old?
I have
You're
the
like
video
17.
ready here.
Oh, good.
Let me go ahead and start this.
Future is tied to the past. Yes, we at Swedish Match are constantly working to improve all our processes in snus production, from seed to can. But one thing remains: premium quality. Quality that can be traced back to Jacob Friedrich Jungluf's small tobacco factory in Stockholm nearly 200 years ago. Our snus is made from selected leaf tobaccos, water, salts, moisture-preserving substances, and flavor additives. Snus is regulated as a food substance in Sweden, so only food-approved additives are used. The manufacturing is performed in premises that comply with food standards. We call this GothiaTech standard. GothiaTech is what makes Swedish Match snus unique in comparison with other smoke-free alternatives on the market. This is Swedish Match's very own quality standard, a result of decades of research and development. It guarantees our customers a product strictly controlled and tested. In the first stage of preparation, the tobacco meal is mixed with water and salt and then heated up. The temperature of the mixture is strictly controlled. This process can be compared with pasteurization. The snus is then cooled and all other ingredients added. A test panel is used for quality control to ensure the snus tastes as it always has. Consistency is key. If given the thumbs up, the batch is ready to be packed. Portions are measured and inserted into a cellulose fiber tube. They're sealed, cut, and packed into plastic cans before getting weighed and labeled. Already packaged snus is kept in cold storage rooms before being shipped out to our retailers and our end users who choose Swedish snus as their smoke-free alternative.
I love that video.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think I have a picture on the SnusCENTRAL Facebook page, but a friend of mine and I went to visit and tour Swedish Match facilities in 2009, and that's when they let you take pictures and go places they don't let you go now. And we were actually in the chiller room, and there were 4 million cans of snus packaged in that room. That's a 48-hour supply for their distribution network. 4 million cans. That's
amazing.
Awe-inspiring. I tried to walk out with a pallet, but I didn't get very far.
Whenever we went, they wouldn't let us take pictures. They were very, very firm about not taking pictures of anything. They're like, you can talk about it and what goes on here and tell everybody, you know, what you saw, but no pictures.
We were the guinea pig trip, so I think somebody said we went too far after we left.
Uh-oh.
Sounds like he's in pain.
I don't know what he's doing.
Give him a portion.
You know, one of the
He'll probably do backflips.
One of the interesting things here is, you know, I know Matt started out vaping and then he switched to snus. And there's also been a couple individuals that I know who have done the same thing, just because they found it to be more convenient. They like the delivery method better. They like the taste. I talked to a couple people that switched from snus and smokeless products to vaping, and that's what they like. You know, so I think you've got both sides of the fence there. There's definitely several different ways to approach it. The basic benefit here, though, is, of course, that we're talking about products that, especially if you're using the best of the best when it comes to quality-wise, they have very, very low TSNA concentrations, and they are truly modified risk or reduced harm. I guess I can't call them modified risk, Larry, at least not in the U.S. But
not quite yet.
Yeah. But it's definitely, it behooves somebody who's trying to reduce or eliminate their addiction to combustible tobacco to try one of these products, because they both have a lot of potential to save lives. That's the bottom line.
I agree. That's why we're here.
Well, with that being said, we can segue into Larry telling us a little bit more about what's going on with MRTP and the EU snus ban.
I've always paid attention to the legal and the governmental end of this, just because it's fascinating and infuriating at the same time. In 2009, 2 laws were passed and signed in the middle of the night. One called the PACT Act and the other the Tobacco Control Act. And between the two of them, control of tobacco products effectively went under FDA. And FDA's first commissioner, Dr. Lawrence Deaton, was not the person that should have had the job. And a lot of things collected dust on his desk. Procedures were not codified. When Mitch Zeller came in afterwards, there's a process. One of the most infuriating things in the U.S. is if you go to a store that sells General Snus and you're a smoker and you say, hey, my buddy, I heard him mention that, let me look at it. And you look on the side of the can and it says, this product causes cancer. This product will cause your teeth to fall out and your gums to bleed. Well, then why should I switch from cigarettes if this is an equally dangerous product? And the answer is those labels, with the exception of one, which says nicotine is highly addictive. The other three warnings do not apply to Swedish Snus. So FDA under Zeller finally finished the process for a manufacturer to go for a modified risk tobacco product designation. It's not easy to do. The Swedish match application took well over a year. It was 123,000 pages long of data, study, documents, ingredients, manufacturing product, showing that, number one, it doesn't cause mouth cancer or oral cancer, so that warning label should be removed. It doesn't cause tooth loss and gum damage, so that label should be removed. It is, what they want to change it to, while any tobacco product has some risk to it, Swedish Snus is considerably safer than cigarettes.
Right, and currently, I mean, and Larry, I know you can attest to this because obviously with SnusCENTRAL, you have to put all these warning labels on the products before you ship them to the U.S. One of the labels actually said, this product is not a safe alternative to cigarettes.
Yeah.
Which, in my mind, is a ridiculous statement to make, period. I guess they were very careful when they used the word safe. Because, again, we mentioned the fact that nothing is 100% safe. We're talking about relative risk. So, again, with tobacco and conventional smoking of combustible cigarettes being at 100, we're talking about vapor products and snus at that 1 to 2% on that scale of relative risk. So it's ridiculous that they would use that type of restrictive labeling on it, and I think that's at least an impediment to the people who are interested in using this as a way to reduce their dependency on smoking. Especially
the ones like most Americans, like I was that first day, who have no real knowledge of what snus is. In fact, that's why I created SnusCENTRAL.org, because there was no central location in 2007 where you could have all the information, all the studies, all the content, all the government issues, a forum, everything in one place. So it made it basically what took me 6 weeks to sort through. I wanted to make it a lot easier for somebody coming to it. But the label, that's why there is an MRTP process, and it's a long one. And there was a story that came out in April. There was a public comments period on this. There's review, there's peer review, and then all the papers burst out around April 10th, 13th. FDA rules against General Snus MRTP application.
Yeah.
And in fact, first, it didn't rule against it. An advisory committee, the Tobacco Products Scientific Advisory Committee, TPSAC, to the FDA, they had a split vote of 2 for, 2 against, and 1 abstention concerning recommending to FDA that the application be approved. And FDA is under, they usually do, but they're under no obligation to follow TPSAC's recommendations. Interesting also is that about 4 weeks prior to that, 4 members of TPSAC either resigned or were fired by FDA for conflicts of interest.
Yep, I remember
and
that.
I knew I wanted a quick source to find out if the reasonable people got purged or this was the anti-all tobacco extremists. So I went to Tobacco Free Kids with Matt Myers, one of the most bigoted anti-tobacco people I've met. And he had a long missive about how could FDA do this to these fine, learned gentlemen and how wonderful they are and how harmful this was. So I knew immediately that these were fanatics. So FDA has a year once Swedish Match files the application to rule yes or no. Swedish Match filed it in June. So theoretically, within a few days, we should have an answer. FDA recently mentioned, well, we didn't actually put it in the system till August. So now we may have to wait till August to find out. Is it going to go through? A lot of people are pessimistic because it's a tobacco product. But Mitch Zeller, even though he's fought pretty hard on the anti-tobacco side in his private dealings before he was in government and even in government, he was in FDA before, he talks about a continuum of risk where at the top you have cigarettes being incredibly deadly, and then you go down from there. And depending where a product falls in there, is it worthy of being considered a better alternative than cigarettes, a less harmful alternative, because nicotine is just so addicting. So I'm kind of hoping for a 50-50. If the White House comes down and says we don't want to see that, it's not going to happen, though it's supposed to be independent. But we'll know by August. And for current snus users in the U.S., it's not going to affect you in the slightest. You'll still be able to get the snoozes you can, where you can. The internet snus shops, which is where most people go, they're still going to be able to offer their full selection, though it will have to be labeled and comply
Larry,
with the FDA rules. Yeah.
Now are they still talking about changing the taxes based on harm reduction?
The taxes are effective. Well, they're.
Because I know there was a time they were talking about tax brackets for different risks.
Yeah.
I guess you'd say.
That's been kind of put off to the side right now, just trying to get this through. And then you have Reynolds came along and screwed everything up. After Swedish Match went through all this work and the whole process, they dump out some citizen petition, which says that we should be able to take off the this product is as dangerous as cigarettes because all smokeless tobacco is less harmful than cigarettes. And generically, that may or may not be true. Macla, which is a type of smokeless tobacco used in India and Asia, is horribly carcinogenic. I know Brad Radu over at on his website, he advocates that along Reynolds' lines. I don't. I think that every manufacturer is going to have to be able to prove that their products qualify. If the 10 products that Swedish Match submitted are approved, every other snus manufacturer in the world just can't send an application saying, read the Swedish Match one, change the name to our product, and let's go.
No, and that's one of the discussions we had before was that people were trying to piggyback on that, but they can't sell the Swedish Experience because the Swedish Experience was put together by Swedish Match.
Right.
Well, and more specifically, the GothiaTech standards and processing, that's exclusive to Swedish Match. They own that. So while all other Swedish snus is made to the food product safety standards in Sweden, they are not made necessarily to GothiaTech standards, which are not generally all published. And Swedish Match likes it that way because it gives them a vantage point that others. Though, for those of you that are saying, now Etan and Rodalakit and all those can suddenly come to the U.S. over the counter? Answer is no. They would have to be resubmitted. Swedish Match has said, especially with their market share, which is less than 10% at this point of the snus market in the U.S., which is ridiculously small, they're not going to introduce any new brands or any extra strongs or strongs until they start seeing double-digit market share, more around the 40% point.
Now,
So all this will do, if it goes through, is it will help those people out there who are just hearing about snus be more comfortable trying it, and we can get them off cigarettes. And let's be honest, with everybody yelling about healthcare here and around the world, those 42 million people here, the majority of which are going to sicken and die because of cigarettes, we're all paying those medical bills one way or the other. The 150 million people in the EU, the 1 billion people that BAT references worldwide, there are costs involved with that. And if people are healthy and they're not smoking, healthcare costs go down. So it's good for society.
You know what? I agree with you, Larry. There's one thing I want to bring up here, and it's just basically how duplicitous the regulation of different stimulants is.
Yes.
And this is a great example here. What I have is I have my latest issue of Popular Science magazine. And I don't really read that much of Popular Science, but I don't know how to cancel it because I got enrolled in one of those auto subscription services.
Okay, because I was really going to start ripping you here. Just a second.
I'm ready to cancel my credit card to get rid of it, but I will say this. I did read this article. They've got a full-page article here. Let me see if I can pull this up. This is an article about caffeine, and the title here is The Surprising Downer of the planet's most popular stimulant. And the article basically goes on to talk about the fact that 73% of U.S. kids consume caffeine on any given day. It says that 2014 pediatrics paper, a Yale study found that middle schoolers who imbibe energy drinks are at a 66% higher risk for hyperactivity than their peers. Kids' caffeine usage is also linked to depression and substance abuse. So it also goes on to talk about the fact that right now it's not regulated. You can go on eBay and you can buy caffeine powder, okay, readily available in bulk on eBay. In 2014, the Food and Drug Administration, spurred by 2 lethal overdoses, warned that people should avoid the stuff, but an outright ban is unlikely. One teaspoon of caffeine powder is equivalent to 25 cups of coffee. My point here is just that they need to, they can't pick and choose. That's my thoughts. I understand that there's different levels of addiction associated with different stimulants. But, you know, at least in the vaping world, we're under fire right now. Because they're saying that we're advertising to children. And there's a group of very concerned vendors that have gotten together and they've formed a coalition to basically state that they are not going to advertise to children. They're going to do everything within their power to make sure that the products that they sell do not have the appeal to children. And I'll be honest here. There are some companies, because it's been the Wild West for a while, Larry, when it comes to vaping. There's some companies that are using cartoon characters on their labeling. They're using, the fruit and candy names. Sometimes they're using even trademarked color schemes and logos to advertise their product. Because there's no regulation out there. What?
I said Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I got a couple pictures I might be able to show later. Because there's no regulations out there right now, basically you have the bad apples that are spoiling the whole barrel. So there's legitimate manufacturers out there. They want to make a high-quality product inside a lab that's as clean as possible and is also a reduced harm product. And then there's the guys that are out there to just make a quick buck and capitalize off somebody else's name. So that's where you get the Fruit Gushers and the Snapple e-liquids and the Juicy Juice e-liquids and a plethora of others that are playing off known brands. Well, obviously they're going to get they're gonna have lawsuits, or at least C&Ds, which actually happened this week. Somebody got sent a cease and desist over a Cracker Jacks e-liquid, and I, for one, I'm delighted to see it. So I applaud those vendors that have formed this coalition, and hopefully that'll gain some traction. And I believe you guys have seen something even more restrictive than that over in the EU. At least it appears to be that way, because some of the flavor names are changing. Isn't that right? In regards to some products?
In regards to snus?
In regards to snus, even with just fruit names.
Well, it's kind of weird. The Swedes are a very polite people, which makes them not very good negotiators. I wish they would hire American lawyers. We would have gotten rid of the snus ban 20 years ago. But V2 Tobacco, which is a Danish company that makes very good snus, they're coming out with a special edition. One of the flavors is Nilla, for example. And they can't use the word vanilla as of January 1st, 2016, because the flavor names are banned. And you're going to see Thunder Wintergreen turn into Thunder W. Now, Sweden's response to this was first, no, you can't do it. We'll drop out of the EU. And that quickly changed to, I guess if you want to, what are we going to do? And then now if we're going to do it, if you do it, we're going to ignore it. But the final decision hasn't been made yet whether to ignore it.
Well, so, you have to, Larry. You remember in the U.S. when this happened with cigarettes. When back when I was a smoker, there was Marlboro Lights, there was Marlboro Reds, there was Marlboro Smooth and stuff like that. And then, a few years back, they had to take all that off the boxes to where it's just the name Marlboro and color. They took off anything that was indicative of a flavor or to imply that it was lighter in any aspects as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, Sweden's snus culture goes back over 200 years. It's a part of who they are. And to have to take, Göteborg's Lingon, have to take off Lingon and call it Göteborg's L, or go back to number 2, or you can't use Half-Dorn. You got it's just it's ridiculous. What's most ridiculous is that Sweden is the only country in the EU where snus is legal to purchase and use retail. So the EU is in fact making a law that only applies to Sweden. They're writing Swedish domestic law because no snus can be sold legally in the EU. So if I were the Swedish government, again, I would have told them to go to hell a long time ago. And we'll see how that plays out, whether politeness wins out over heritage and history, January 1st of 2016.
I'm trying to see if I can find it. I had a couple pictures of what a pack of cigarettes looks like in Australia. And
there's some interesting ones from other countries where with all the pictures of the diseases and stuff.
Yeah, that's one of them, and they're not allowed. They're not allowed to have many types of differentiating details between the products. It's akin to, I believe it was, is it Norway where G3 is marketed primarily?
Well, it's called a dark market. Yeah. Basically, you walk up to a counter and they have a closed cabinet behind them. They open the doors and say, "Which snus do you want?" And you pick it, and they close the doors very quickly.
Yeah.
What's ironic with the plain packaging movement is some of it has gotten to the point where it's nothing on it at all except very small, the brand name, and maybe one type of bland descriptor. What that really does, WHO, that little video clip we saw in the beginning, was against illegal tobacco trafficking, which it makes it a lot easier to counterfeit a white box that just says Marlboro on it than it does having to match the colors and the graphics and everything else. So the whole plain packaging movement is a boon to counterfeiters.
Yeah.
I think that's what everyone wants, though, in the no tobacco community, is they want everything to look the same, so it's not appealing to anybody but the person that knows what it is and wants that. So it's not marketed, so you can't market it. It's unmarketable, basically. and it's not going to have any shelf appeal. And it's basically going to be, hey, well, I know about this product, I'm going to have it. But for new people getting into, nicotine or tobacco products, they don't want any signs that can basically get them involved.
And what's ironic is when you brought up the NRT tax before, in Sweden, they've been constantly raising the tax on snus over the past few years, it's a weight-based tax, which is why the portions have been getting smaller. They're trying to keep the cost down for the Swedish consumer. The cigarette tax last year went up about 6%. I may be a point or two off on these figures. The snus tax went up 11%.
Wow.
And you say to yourself, why would they raise the snus tax so much higher? Because people will go back to cigarettes, and some have, because the price is equalizing. And the Swedish government's answer is, we make all the snus here, and we tax it at the manufacturer's level, so we're not worried about counterfeits. But cigarette counterfeiting and smuggling in, that is a problem, so we're afraid to raise the cigarette tax too high, or people will start buying the counterfeits and we'll make no revenue. So it's just more hypocrisy.
Well, here in the U.S., snus is still cheaper than smoking. My last order was pretty cheap. What I got was I got 42 cans, and it was about $4 a can on average with shipping and everything like that. But whenever you look at, particularly me, how much I use about 0.62 of a can a day, which is about $2.50 a day in tobacco usage. When I was a smoker, I was a pack-a-day smoker, which is about $7 a box here now. So I'm saving a lot of money by using snus, and that's still even with prices going up.
Now, the main problem I've noticed is that if you wanted to buy it locally instead of buy it online, which we know about buying online, but not the average consumer is going to go into the store and buy their cigarettes. So if they want to go buy snus, they're going to go to the store and try to buy some snus. Well, the problem down here specifically is that snus is still almost double the cost of cigarettes. A pack of cigarettes is almost half the cost of what a can of snus is down here. You're seeing snus for $9 a can down here, which is ridiculous.
Wow, that's really high. Here we have it's a different problem here. It's relatively cheap here in Arizona. I mean, sometimes as low as $2.50, $2.99 a can. And then with coupons, it's indeed even lower. Its availability is what seems to be the biggest hurdle here. You have a couple of general lines. You have the wintergreen and the mint, and in some shops regular, but not very many. And a lot of it is very badly dated and has been sitting there for quite some time. And I think it's just indicative of the market, that it just doesn't have a strong enough market hold yet.
Well, that's true.
People know about it.
It's also Sweden. They think of the United States as one country, just like we think of Sweden as one country. But the total population of Sweden isn't that much larger than the population of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So my contention had always been, don't look at America as one country. Look at it as 50 countries and attack it state by state. Lorillard, when they made their horribly ineffective attempt to launch Triumph Snus, which Swedish Match actually made for them, they picked a couple of states and they launched it out of there. Same thing with Marlboro and Camel, 5 markets generally, and then they grow it from there. You can't attack the entire United States and expect to have chillers full of products with people coming in, stocking them every day like they do in Sweden, checking the expiration dates. There aren't enough people that work for Swedish Match North America to be able to do that.
No, and you're not going to get that with you're not going to get the cooperation from all the resellers at this time.
No, and a lot of that is economic. They're on such tight margins that they don't want to plug the chillers in. I mean, you go to Sweden, every single can of snus by anybody is sold in a chiller, and the Swedes wouldn't have it any other way. But even in the Swedish Match tobacco stores here, you'll go in and you'll find it's unplugged because it's a hit on their electric bill, and they got to save every penny where they can. It's a low margin business.
Yeah, and they're not making as they figure they're not going to make as much on the snus as they would other products because there's not as big a markup on it, maybe, or they just won't sell enough.
Or they mark it up too much, and the average
then they'll sell it.
consumer walking in doesn't know that it's supposed to be in a chiller with the power turned on. So there's no pushback. Occasionally there is, and I hooked up one of the forum members on SnusCENTRAL.org got a hold of me about some stores in Florida, actually, and I sent that over to Mike Dean, who's the brand manager for Swedish Match North America, and he immediately got back to them. They checked the stores. I think he stopped by his house and maybe he left some snus there. I don't know. But the stores were corrected. They're very serious about it. It's just the country's too large to police. And getting the internet is where all the selection is going to be. You'll have over 200 different brands on the internet, depending where you look. And it's word of mouth from current snoozers, people like us, websites like us, Facebook pages like us, that is going to get the word out to these people until it picks up enough in the U.S. where over-the-counter really makes sense.
Right.
So I had a question, though, Larry. I mean, as far as, like, education, if you're a tobacco retailer and you want to carry General, the General product line that's available in the U.S., I mean, is there any education after they get that refrigerator and they get their initial supply? Because again, I've been to so many shops now where once they run out, they unplug the fridge. They might have a couple boxes of the snus in a corner somewhere that isn't even refrigerated, and it pains me to see that, because I know, it's a product with so much potential, and yet it seems to be crippled by maybe not necessarily the best point of sale training.
Exactly. Yeah. And it gets back to scale. There was Swedish Match traditionally reorganizes every year or so. So I know before the last reorganization, I would get tales from stores where the box would show up with the chiller, filled with the snus, and a plug and a sheet on where to put it and how to plug it in. And that's all the support they got, and a number to call to reorder. I know Mike Dean, so I'm sure he's addressing that. But again, there are so many scattered stores across the U.S., and the guys that go in there, they go in every 2 months, every 60 days, they'll visit a store. And their primary focus of the products, they know, cigars and chew.
Yeah.
And it's not a big enough point of sale presence, and the education is not there. Some people have tried to change that. Some distributors have, but it's a really uphill battle on because the turnover is high, and also in the C stores, you walk into a 7-Eleven, they don't want you giving lessons on snus. They want you getting those Slurpee guys through the line, helping up they pick up a pretzel or two and a lottery ticket and get to the next one.
That's another question I had too. It's like, how do you, like, let's say, because I've thought about this several times. Obviously, with a lot of different vape shops, they have to have a tobacco license in certain states in order to be able to sell vapor products. So that gives them the opportunity, if they wanted to possibly carry snus as an option in a refrigerated case. And I think it's a pretty good, I think it would be a pretty good move, to tell you the truth, because again, it's a viable alternative. It's reduced harm. But
it's not even alternative. They
complement
each other.
Yeah, that's true.
Camel's first ad campaign was when you can't smoke snus. I would say, which is a horrible thing, just to keep you smoking. I would say today, when you can't vape, which is becoming more and more places, you can snus. I mean, when I fly to Sweden, that's a 7-8 hour flight. If I didn't have snus, my head would have exploded before I even got into Canada.
Sure.
Yeah.
So they complement each other, and I agree. The vape shops, I think it would be a really good add-on product, and they have the time to explain it that way to a consumer.
And that was my question then. So as just a person who's an employee working at a shop, Given that the fact that this product hasn't been considered a modified risk product by the FDA officially, they haven't passed on their approval. Obviously, it's going to have the warning labels, and I don't have a new can here I'd show you, but it'll have the warning labels that U.S. Products brought into the U.S. have to have, and those would have to remain intact. But education at the point of sale, I'm wondering if that is something that you could do. Could you educate the consumer at the point of sale and say, look, here's a product that, again, you can go look at the TSNA content and maybe explain that to them, and the viability of this product as a reduced harm alternative. Is that something that a person is within their legal rights to do?
They have to be very careful what they say. The manufacturers are very, very limited, and the distributors on what they can say. I know a friend of mine who works for a distributor. When he does training classes on snus, he says, I can't tell you about the health benefits of this over cigarettes, but there's some websites you can go to. So go Google snus and health and read for yourself.
Right.
Now, in a vape shop, I think that concept it's an epiphany, because all you've really got to say is it's nicotine. It's totally discreet. When you can vape, you can do this. There's no spitting. And you got flavors that you can do it in a paragraph and get them on their way. Where if you're trying to switch someone from cigarettes to oral tobacco, that's more of a in-depth conversation.
Now, Larry, the only problem I see is that they're gonna, if they start pushing in vape shops the snus and saying that you can use this when you can't vape, you're gonna have the anti-tobacco using the same argument they used to use about dual users.
We already have that.
We do.
That was one of the reasons that they said that they, at least the advisory panel. That's correct, right, Larry? It was an advisory panel that actually weighed in on the MRTP application. So the advisory panel said that there wasn't enough data on dual users or dual use scenarios, and they used that as a reason for basically their ruling. And to me, that's ridiculous because, again, I don't believe people should be vilified for dual using a product. To tell you the truth, if you're smoking cigarettes and you think that this can reduce your dependency on cigarettes, forget about eliminate it. I still think there's a benefit for somebody who...
You're still reducing harm. The overall goal of reducing harm is exactly that. And I like the two-prong approach with vaping and snus. I think it's an excellent marriage. I think it works really well together. I certainly do agree that there will be some eyes that see this and say, well, this not only is it encouraging dual use, you're peddling dual usage. And that's not really the point. The bigger issue is that we're still providing much greater harm reduction, but yet people are still finding alternative ways to use nicotine while reducing the harm, and I think that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the way I look at it. Whenever I talk to people about, I use Swedish snus and I use nasal snuff, and I've been told before that I'm a dual user because of that. But if nasal snuff is 98% safer than smoking and Swedish snus is 99% safer than smoking, I really don't consider myself a dual user when I've got a percent of risk between those two products.
Right. Yeah, you're talking a minuscule percentage of risk, even though the government would say that you're a dual usage. And to me, that's just preposterous. And it's so ridiculous that my hope is that eventually someone will see the benefit, that there is a solid benefit. And especially, again, and I hate to keep beating a dead horse, but when you take the two-pronged approach as compared to pharmaceuticals and other methods of nicotine reduction and replacement therapy, this is absolutely and unequivocally, in my mind, the most effective, because you solve both issues of the smoker. You give them very steadily, evenly distributed and delivered nicotine, and you're also helping with the hand-to-mouth habit with vaping as well. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's just we have to continue the education like we all are now with everybody between vaping and snus, and continue to push that you're helping yourself even if you are quote-unquote dual using.
What are you doing to that dog over there, Dash?
I'm not doing anything. He's on my bed running around crying.
And,
In a little butthole.
you know, I wanted to add something here too, real quick.
Sure.
I want to give my buddy Josh Brink a shout out because he's actually 120 days without a cigarette, and
Wow.
That's awesome.
yeah, he stopped over to my house, and he was a pack-a-day smoker for 5 years, and he came over. I had a bunch of snus that I ordered, and I ended up giving him a portion when he wanted a cigarette, and from that point on, he had his cigarette craving cut in almost 3 days with just using snus. And like I said before, snus or vaping is a great alternative, but for some people it doesn't work. My buddy Josh tried vaping for about a year, and it just didn't cut it for him. So when I found snus, he was super happy about that, and so yeah, it's been an awesome road for him. So he's really enjoying his snus.
Last a couple nights ago on Friday it was, I was in Memphis. I went to see Jerry Seinfeld do stand-up, and I was leaving the parking garage, and right around the corner from the venue I went to, I was walking, and this guy came up to me and was like, hey, I'll pay you for a cigarette. And I was like, I don't have any cigarettes. I pulled a can out of my pocket, and he was like, oh man, I don't dip, that's gross. And I was like, this is snus, it's smoke-free, spitless, doesn't cause cancer, throw one in your mouth. And he was like, all right, whatever. So he grabbed one and threw it in his upper lip. And I remember going on about my way, and I was like, I wonder if that guy's going to like this and go and buy more. So if you're watching random cigarette wanting to buy, dude, I hope you're I hope you're switching.
It depends. Yeah. What was it? Was it like Thunder Ultra Strong White
It was
Dry?
General Wintergreen.
No, it was G3. That was all I had in my pocket was G3 and LD, and I was like, he'll probably like the G3 more.
It's a good thing you weren't carrying loss around. That would have been uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
You just loan him your ice tool. Just a random stranger popping your snooze
You'll need like an ice
lip.
tool condom for people that you lend it to.
Well, that's when I go out to a restaurant or a bar, that's the whole concept of a bar-worthy snooze can, meaning it's a really good-looking snooze can. Because I leave my can, and they do this in Sweden, I leave my can on the bar, on the table, on the meeting table, and it's a conversation starter. And smokers will say, hey, I've heard of that. What is it? And you can give them a some won't take a portion. Some will. Some may and never do it again. But that's what it really boils down to is we as individual snoozers have to be ambassadors for the product right now because the U.S. is just too big and the knowledge of the product is too small.
Right.
Right.
And, just to echo that, I've been guilty of putting some less choice snoozes inside a bar-worthy can's catch lid.
Yep.
Just it's almost. I feel bad. I feel like I'm carrying a fake Prada wallet or something.
An empty can of Isla whiskey snooze is the most valuable thing in your collection. It is by far because that's what you put everything in.
And speaking of which, I'm not going to use this time to complain, but please, V2, just upgrade the can a little bit. I'm not expecting. I don't want the product to skyrocket in price, but I use it a lot, and I'd like to have at least one bar-worthy can.
If they need proof or a testimonial, they can call me because I know how much loss he goes through in a day. Yeah, it is crazy high.
It is.
There was a school of thought in the 2007-8 range that the easiest people to get in the U.S. as snoozers were going to be Southerners that are spit and dip onto their dog's head, and they went
a little too well. You must know that.
Well, I'm a Texan, damn it. So I don't dip, and I can now carry a weapon unconcealed as of thanks to our governor as of Monday. But
Nice.
where was I going with that? I just totally threw my.
Swedish
know.
snus appealing to dippers.
That
Oh,
they
yeah,
would
yeah,
launch
yeah.
their
So
initials
there
to
were some smaller snus manufacturers, some private labelers that they felt that they had to come out. All their POP material should be. I know there was one display that looked like the Dukes of Hazzard, with the girl with the short shorts and everything. And I think V2 kind of went with the dip can look, the non-classic dip can look. And for me, I mean, it's a good-looking can, especially the limited edition run of Thunder Runs they made. But I wouldn't mind seeing them upgrade the Thunder line cans.
Yeah, just a little bit. That's all.
just
I'm
just a little
can-
bit. Here's another suggestion
me.
to Swedish Match. If you get a can in a James Bond movie and he drops a portion in a James Bond movie, you're so in. That high-end market is unbelievably untapped.
Yeah, but now, you know how hard it is to get any tobacco product in a movie now?
They smoke. They do. There's
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah, but
movies
that's-
that smoke.
It's
They do.
so much harder now than it ever was.
And if you watch,
Girl with
Lily-
the dragon
Lilyhammer.
tattoo.
Lilyhammer on
Oh.
Netflix. It's
Yeah.
a series about a gangster that goes to hide out in Norway. They have snooze scenes all the time. In fact, one time the guy was at the bar sitting next to a girl. She said, "Can I have some snooze?" And when he looked in his can back, she had put her room number in it.
Nice.
So it's definitely in media, though you're not going to find snooze as much in the U.S.
Right.
But
Why doesn't that happen
vaping,
in
I've seen vaping on U.S. television now.
Yes, I have.
It was actually in a
Mostly
movie.
fake.
In the movie Neighbors, who's the kid that played the?
Franco?
No, it was Seth Rogen, and their neighbors were Zac Efron. Zac
Yeah, Zac
Efron
Efron and
actually
the other
has
kid.
an ego and vapes in that movie.
There
I
was
didn't notice
a
that.
Nurse Jackie pay channel show
Yeah.
last week. The new doctor was in the basement vaping, and she comes and they start splitting it. And she's like, "Why do you do this?" And he goes, "Well, I'm kind of embarrassed to do it upstairs because it looks a little silly to me, but it works." So you're seeing, and in fact, The Good Wife, there was a scene where they were vaping in the interview room.
I think there was also snooze in that the girl with the dragon tattoo, wasn't there?
Yes,
there
Yes.
was.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The original one, not the American one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's about it. As far as I know, we were going to talk a little bit about vaping. There's been a couple of studies released recently about basically comparative on orders of magnitudes that e-cigarettes are safer than tobacco cigarettes. This is information that the majority of us are familiar with, at least those of us who vape already. It is safer than smoking. Same thing with snus, of course, safer than smoking by orders of magnitude. Once again, and I believe you'll find that to be true almost any time you're talking about combusting a product versus taking it in either its natural state or, in the case of snus, a product that is pasteurized and goes through a process by which the majority of TSNAs are stripped out. Obviously, and Larry, you can speak to this as well, and Chad, of course, I believe everybody's familiar with the fact that, one of the reasons for the tobacco for snus being grown in Sweden and in other locales is at least partially due to the fact that they have these strict quality standards. And, I don't know that you could you meet that in the U.S.? Obviously, it's happened before.
They did.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They did. Actually, Sweden grows very little tobacco now. Most of it comes from, depending on who the vendor is or the manufacturer is, South America, Amish country in Pennsylvania, some Virginia, but mostly Amish, Philippines, Southeast Asia,
Spain.
and Spain. They have tobacco buyers that go out around the world and they check these things. Swedish Match has a process where every single bale of tobacco, a core sample has to be taken, and the core samples are flown to Sweden, where they do the lab tests on them to make sure they meet the standards, and then they're allowed to be shipped to Sweden to make the snus.
Yeah.
Well, you look at General Snus particularly, and General's a blend of 23 different types of tobacco. So,
Wow.
you know, they definitely know where to get good tobacco from.
And sometimes it's hard. Scroof Selection, which was their first all-organic snus, was a reaction to Swedish Match coming up with something called Green Harvest,
which was delicious.
Which was unbelievably delicious, and it was totally no pesticides, no non-organic fertilizer. But the problem was they cleaned out the Amish of the tobacco that qualified, and then Brazil, which was also a big supplier, they decided to go back to pesticides because it was too much work not to. And to get that unique flavor back, they weren't able to find other tobaccos, so they delisted it, which is really, really sad.
And the one thing I noticed about that snus specifically is that the flavor did not last through storage. So I think I tried one 3-4 months later, and the flavor was just gone. It's compared to other snoozes that I've tried a year later, and they taste pretty damn close to the same. But after just a few months, it seemed like the flavor died out on it.
I don't want to derail this topic too much, but somebody in the chat asked if we'd touch on some of the dental issues associated with snus. If you guys wanted to kind of touch on what you've seen,
I think that's a
since
great
you've switched
idea.
over.
What snus raises the pH in your mouth. Swedish snus, because of the salt content. The higher the pH in your mouth, the more the bacteria can't live in that environment.
Right.
So it actually lowers the bacteria count in your mouth. It does, it can stain your teeth, but if you brush and you floss, I've asked my dentist every year since I started 8 years ago, and teeth are fine, gums are healthy, no recession, no disease. I'm not going to come out and say, yeah, snus actually should be in toothpaste because it's healthier for your mouth, but in fact, raising the pH will kill the bacteria.
I mean, my teeth are, I think I've improved since I've used snus. I mean, my teeth are quite decent. I don't know about everybody else, but I mean, I've never had really big teeth problems, but since I've started snoozing, I've noticed my teeth have actually gotten whiter. My dentist loves when I come in. They say everything's great, and I mean, I don't know if they'll be able to see this in the video, but I have all my teeth and they're clean.
They are.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's true. I haven't run across any issues either, and I've been using it pretty regularly, and I have no problems at all. None.
I know I've mentioned this before, but my dentist, he knew I was a smoker, and he used to always tell me all the time, he's like, you got to quit smoking. It's messing up your teeth and all that stuff. And then recently, after quitting smoking and jumping over to snus, every time I see my dentist now, he's like, he asked me if I use tobacco, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, I can't even tell. He's like, your teeth look great, no gum recession, everything looks great in your mouth. So I mean, it's interesting because of all the warnings that are out there about snus and dental issues that I haven't seen a single one of them happen to me.
I would say one thing on that. I think if you already have a history of oral health issues,
Right.
and you start snoozing, one thing I will say, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but because of the use of salt in snus, it does tend to dry you out. So for myself, I hydrate constantly when I'm snoozing. I'm more conscious of having something to drink simply because obviously when you have salt, it'll dry out your gums. I don't want to do anything that could potentially create an issue where there was none before. My dentist also, I went to him probably about a month ago now for a cleaning and a checkup, and he did say that my gum health had actually improved. I know that before I had a little bit of acidity. They said I had a little acidity in my mouth composition, which now my understanding is that because of the pH level that turns into alkalinity. So that's been beneficial as well. That being said, brush and floss. Obviously, if you're using loss, and I'm no stranger to this because I do use loss daily, there will be little bits of finely ground tobacco that will get stuck between your teeth. So it's important to floss. You don't want that stuff staying in there. The actual portion product, on the other hand, again, you're talking about an extremely clean product.
Yeah.
Very pleasant, very soothing, very soft on the gums, at least with the general products, with the Swedish Match products. But definitely hydrate. And that goes for vaping as well. If you vape, you must hydrate. Because we're talking
that's
about...
one thing I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
Is I've noticed, and we talked about this last time we spoke, is that I noticed a lot more dehydration and mouth drying from vaping than I ever did from snus.
Really?
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, it's just I notice I do when I vape more, I do have to hydrate more. I mean, I can snooze all day and basically keep my routine of drinking water when I do, but when I vape, I constantly have to hydrate myself.
I used to get that way too, for sure.
That's interesting.
I think that's pretty much it.
Well, James, one more thing I wanted to bring up,
Sure.
and I don't know if you've seen this. I've noticed down here in Florida, there's been a lot of commercials lately about the propylene glycol in e-cigarettes, and they're trying to vilify that. I don't know if you guys are having the same commercials there, but basically that's the main thing they're focusing on now is the propylene glycol, and basically just talking about antifreeze and stuff like that.
Right.
And I know that's a big misconception of how they're portraying the propylene glycol in e-cigarette juice or e-juice compared to things like antifreeze and the such like that. I mean, I know one thing I always bring up to people is that if you go into a club or a bar, and they have a smoke machine, that's propylene glycol. If most inhalers for asthmatic people are propelled by propylene glycol. So
yeah,
I don't know how it
it's
is
the
everywhere else,
base
but-
for a lot of medical-based disinfectants as well. It's a very, very safe product, and it's not the same chemical makeup as propylene glycol from antifreeze, and that gets missed because I think when people see it, there are a couple of different kinds. It's like it was way back. It was always the alcohol argument was relatively the same. Obviously, the vodka you're drinking is not rubbing alcohol that you're using to clean something or disinfect a wound. It's not the same thing. So, yeah, they're looking anywhere they can to pick and choose to try to vilify, the product, because a lot of what you'll start to see in the future is the whole kids thing. That's become the biggest issue they have is marketing. The kids, they've tried to pick apart the product, and then studies were done to refute their claims. And so far, they've been pretty successful at doing that. So now they're going to look at the marketing aspects of it, and they're going to look at this more, I think, as a culture than as an actual harmful product. And I think that you're going to start see the attacks on the byproduct of such, like, this manufacturer is dubious because they're marketing to our kids. This manufacturer is dubious because he objectifies women in his ads. These are the type of things that you're starting to see become more and more prevalent now.
Here you go. I've got this handy, so I'm going to show it too. This is a pure case of copyright issue.
I've seen that. And you know what the crazy thing is? A lot of these companies that are making these like copyright infringement ones are the ones that are getting the most play on social media, I've noticed.
Right.
So if you go on Instagram and you see all these, vape Instagrams that are hugely popular, well, they're pushing all these. I mean, lately I've been seeing the Snap, which is the Snapple one. That one's been everywhere, I've noticed.
Yeah. It's because, and we're just as guilty as bringing it up as well, because it pops up in social media, it catches the attention of broadcasters like ourselves. All of a sudden, it's out there. It's difficult to ignore a problem that's that big, but sometimes we have to take the industry high road and do just that and ignore it. Because if it doesn't get any play, then it doesn't get sales, and really that's what the most important
No,
thing
the only problem is it's just like when you talk about news, you kind of have to talk about some of that stuff, because if you don't, you're missing out on that point.
Right. And when we do, that's why we attempt to try to bring as much attention that's not as positive to those people as we possibly can, and point out, look, this is not funny. It's not a joke. If you want legitimacy in this industry, these things have to stop.
And Costello and Chat brought up a good point. We're trying to shame the vendors, but it may backfire. That's very true. But I'll tell you, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen here. Those are intellectual property. They're not even intellectual properties. They're properties of companies that voraciously defend those properties.
And have a lot of money.
You know, they start getting traction, buddy. I'm telling you what, they're going to get shut down. It's already starting.
What's the most recent one? The most recent one is Girl Scout cookies, right? Yeah. Girl Scout cookies are General Mills is now going after e-liquid manufacturers for infringing upon names of Girl Scout cookies.
And again, they have a legitimate claim for a couple of reasons, because you can consider the fact that you have an organization called the Girl Scouts selling Girl Scout cookies, and now you're playing off of that with your flavor in this day and age when they're talking about the appeal to youth. I mean, it's just a very bad idea. So again, I applaud these vendors that are stepping up, and they're making those appropriate changes to child-safe caps and not advertising or using any type of labeling that appeals to children. I think it was a good move. So
well, a lot of the good vendors and stuff, and the good makers of a lot of these e-juices, I remember probably 4 years ago or 3-4 years ago, they started changing the name of their flavors to more socially acceptable names. So they might have had one named Juicy Fruit. Well, now it's just called like Super Juicy or something, something that's not the same, but it still gets the point across that it's a similar flavor to something else.
And you know what? That's a good point. And I'll tell you what we as an industry are guilty of, and our show as well, at least to a certain degree. While we are shaming those bad vendors, I don't think we nearly enough applaud the ones that are doing well that are being responsible and doing the right thing. And I think that's the mindset that needs to change as well, because we should be highlighting responsible vendors who are being successful because they're being responsible and representing the industry appropriately. And I think that's what needs to happen too.
See, Larry, this is what you guys are missing over on the Snus side of things. There's not enough drama.
Trust me, we have our drama.
Oh man.
Well, I want to before we come to an end. One thing I want to say is that we're doing this to raise awareness of tobacco harm reduction and safer methods of nicotine consumption, such as snus and vaping and stuff like that. And one thing I've been saying for years, I think when I first started doing Snoopy.com, I think Larry had a part in encouraging me to do it, along with a few other people. So now we kind of pass that buck on to you guys, everybody out there who's watching these videos and reading articles and forums and reviews and stuff like that. We need the next generation to start doing this too. We need more people out there doing what we're doing, because the awareness isn't going to be raised unless there's more people out there doing this. Like Nash's YouTube videos and Inside Vaping and SnusCENTRAL and Snoopy.com and Matt's YouTube videos and all that. We need 50 to 100 times more people out there doing what we're doing. So if anybody out there is watching and wants to have a creative outlet, this is a good way to do it. We could definitely use your help.
Definitely.
Absolutely good point. Absolutely.
The other thing too is, I was thinking about this. Once you read the evidence, this is really a product, and again, it's different. And please don't take this the wrong way. For those of you who are vaping, this is not critical of vaping in any way, but presenting the facts. We're talking about technology that has been around for a very short period of time, compared with something that has extensive health studies, large-scale health studies. What was that one, Chad, that studied how many construction workers over a period of 75 years or something?
The Karolinska study, isn't that right, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah. And so when I told my wife, I'm like, I tried this stuff 10 years ago, because I did. I tried it 10 years ago. I was at a conference and somebody had a can. I stepped out for a cigarette and they had a can of snus, and I think it was General Mint, and he gave me some because I couldn't smoke at that location. They had a no smoking policy on the campus. And I really enjoyed it. But, fast forward 10 years, I told my wife, look, I'm vaping, but I need a little bit more nicotine, and I don't want to consume all this e-liquid. So I'm thinking about starting the snus. She did research. She went out there, and she did the research. 2 days later, she came back, and she said, okay, I've looked at this stuff. I've researched it extensively, and I am completely fine with you starting to use snus. And that was really refreshing for me, because how many wives out there, she's a great wife for one thing, to actually care about me that much and still say yes at the end of that research. But the research stands up for itself. It really does.
Well, I know me personally, my wife, when we started dating, we had talked about people who have bad habits and stuff like that, and she was talking about how she doesn't like guys who dip, and I was like, oh God, this is going to be fun to explain. And I was like, okay, well, I use something that's like dip, but I don't have to spit. It's not going to make my teeth fall out, and it's not going to give me cancer. And I was like, here's some research studies, check it out and stuff like that. Now, she's been on board for 2 years and has helped me out and encouraged me and stuff like that. So, I mean, at first, one thing I've noticed is that women are kind of iffy about it, but once they kind of understand what it is, they don't really see it as that big of a deal.
My wife came from a family of 5. None of the kids smoked, but both parents were smoking like chimneys their whole lives. And I was a smoker when she met. And she never said anything for all these years. When I switched to snus, she's like, thank God you don't smell of cigarettes anymore. The bathroom doesn't smell of cigarettes. I can kiss you without cringing. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I had to bring my wife the evidence. I had to print out articles and show her everything about it before she was on board with it. So
yeah.
Yeah, James and James can attest. He knows we read immensely, because whenever I am the eternal skeptic. Whenever I hear anything that's near bulletproof, I was like, that's ridiculous. There has to be some weakness in this product. There's got to be something in it. I looked and I couldn't find one, and I said, well, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And I did, and again, James had said that we're not trying to be an infomercial here for Swedish Snus, and certainly I don't want to do that either. But I have not found a product that continuously and consistently delivers the quality of nicotine and flavor that this product does than almost anything else that I've tried. And this has worked exceptionally well for me. And again, with the people with the hand-to-mouth habit, if you just do yourself a favor and try the two-pronged approach. I guarantee when you're sitting in a movie theater, or you're on a long flight, or you're at work, or on a business trip, that when you use snus, you will be amazed at the lack of the need to vape or smoke a cigarette. That jonesing for nicotine will not be there.
And also, I'd encourage, obviously, our vaping audience is already aware of this, but I would also encourage our snoozing audience to go and check out CASA.org.
Absolutely.
CASA is a wonderful organization, and they don't just exist for vapor products.
That's very correct.
Yep.
And the majority of the calls to action that you do see will be, of course, for vapor products, because that is under fire on state and federal levels at this point, and obviously that fight is heating up. But we do want people to be able to choose, too, when it comes to a form of tobacco harm reduction. We want them to be able to choose between a clean Swedish snus product or a smokeless product, or vapor products if they're seeking to reduce their use of combustible products. So check out CASA.org.
Absolutely. Yeah, join CASA. It is a wealth of resources and information. They will keep you abreast at what's going on politically, nationally. They are a very, very good resource for all things tobacco harm reduction.
And if you're in the EU, STOC is the organization that you want to follow.
Huh. What is that website again, Larry?
ESTOC.
ESTOC.org.
Try that. I'm not sure.
TobaccoHarmReduction.org is a very good one in the U.S. as well. It's Dr. Rodu's group.
Okay. Yeah, this is STOC.org, European Smokeless Tobacco Council. Yeah,
Yes.
very good.
Now, with Brad Rodu, you gotta realize a lot of people, and I've noticed this has been under fire for a while now, is that he does get some of his funding from tobacco corporations, but he plainly states that
Right.
and tells you that straight up front. He's not like he's hiding it, and I don't see that it affects what he does, but some people still think that he has some, skin in the game, which I don't believe it, but he is a very good resource as well, and he has a lot of really good stuff on there.
And he's one of the originals. He's been fighting this fight for decades, and it almost got him thrown out of academia. What he writes scientifically is outstanding. Him and I differ a little bit on dip and snuff versus snus, but we're on the same page globally for pretty much everything.
I think that's it for me. I don't know. Do you have anything else on the agenda there, Chad?
No. Basically, just thanks everybody for watching. Stay involved as much as you can. Any of these websites. If you want the most up-to-date information, we all have Facebook pages: SnusCENTRAL, Snoopy.com, Inside Vaping. You can stay up to date with the Facebook pages and see what's going on. Like I said, I encourage everybody to start some kind of creative outlet to help, alert people to harm reduction, a podcast, a video, a blog, anything you can to help raise awareness. It's not like it was, like Larry said, when he first started out, there wasn't any centralized resources. And now, even though him and I are pretty much the only ones who are snus-centric as far as what we do, we need a lot more people out there who are doing what we're doing to help raise awareness. The more people who are doing it, the more accessible it's going to be, the more political pull we'll have to help get rid of a lot of these laws and regulations and bogus things we're dealing with. So I just encourage everybody to get involved and to get out there and help spread the word, because, in the end, harm reduction is nothing if not a community. So we need more people working together to help raise that awareness.
We do. And for those that don't have the time to do a blog regularly or videos regularly, SnusCENTRAL.org is all volunteers, right down to our forum moderators. If you want to write an article, we'll publish it, if it's good. Same thing for a video.
That's why I have my own website now.
Yeah. Well, we have
make the cut.
We have a specific column for guest columnists, guest reviewers, and we're happy to put your stuff up there, and then you can share those links with your communities and spread the word more.
Don't worry, Larry will correct your grammar and make it all right.
That sounds like spoken from experience there.
Yeah, I'll clean it up.
Yeah, I think there's a couple exciting products coming up in the next few months too. So I think this is going to be a pretty good year for snus.
It is.
This isn't going to be the last time we do this, so we're going to keep doing this every year as long as they're doing World No Tobacco Day and coming up with these ridiculous campaigns. We're going to keep doing this to counteract whatever's going on. I know, the Great American Smokeout's another one. So every year, whenever you see these things happen where all these people are attempting to demonize tobacco and say, quit or die, just remember there's alternatives, and you don't have to listen to what they're telling you. Get out there and be informed and do your research yourself, because you'll find that, the media doesn't always tell you the truth, believe it or not.
Believe it or not.
It's always important to do research. Always important to do research.
And you can use nicotine and be healthy.
Yep.
And not smoke.
Great point. Yeah, that's a great point. You can.
Yeah, and I've got a picture of SnusCENTRAL.org up here right now. So, again, I pulled this up mostly because I wanted to show the bar-worthy can. Nick and Johnny Small Batch. Which
that is a bar-worthy can.
Oh, that's a great can. And you know what's
It's
surprising
beautiful.
about that snus? I do not like licorice, and I surprisingly can use that product.
Yeah.
Right
yeah,
on,
I don't like
hands down.
licorice either, but that one
Hands
I
down,
enjoy.
What's wrong with you people?
That's the best licorice snus on the market right now, hands down.
Yeah, that's on the market now. I enjoyed Grove Svart a lot more when that was around.
Which is not
delicious.
General licorice was my go-to. If I have an upset stomach or something, I would use it for snoozing. But the Nick and Johnny Small Batch, it just goes good all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good snus.
which I just
I'm-
switched to.
I'm late to the game with rhodolactic portions because I tried it briefly and I didn't really like it the first time I tried it, but now I got to say I do love it. And
Yeah,
I also
I-
like the screw.
And I've
candle.
learned that anytime Connie Anderson is going to make something, you need
It's
to go
delicious.
on Snus Central and get it
Yeah.
because it'll only last for like an hour.
Yes.
And we'll be hearing some good news from Connie this year also on some new products that we can't talk about. The first will be a loose, I believe, which should be out in August.
That gives James the anticipatory sweats right now.
Yes, exactly.
I'm still
I've-
waiting.
I've got my my ice tool raised at the ready.
He's ready.
I'm ready
He's
for it.
absolutely ready.
I'm still waiting. Connie told me he was going to adopt me and give me all the snus I wanted, and I'm still waiting for that to happen.
I'm still waiting for my box of
I think
cartons
he just-
2009 he
he just,
promised me.
He felt bad for you because you look like a homeless guy.
Yeah, or something.
All right, I think that's it for the show. Thanks
agree.
everybody for joining us once again, and remember there are alternatives out there. Definitely, there's better alternatives than the majority of the NRTs on the market.
Yep.
You know, more effective, more proven.
Yes.
So
They
And
work
if you're tuning in
better
late,
than
this video
50%.
will be up later on the Snooze Central YouTube channel. If you're tuning in
Yeah,
late,
we
you can
may
catch the
we
whole
may
thing.
put it up on our channel too as well. Are we
Sure.
going
Okay.
to do that, James? Are we going to
Yeah,
put it
we
up
can.
outside?
There you
Hey,
go.
if you want, send it to me as well. I'll post it on mine as well.
Excellent.
okay.
All right. And if anyone has any questions out there, that's what we're all here for. So you can post them here. You can go on our Facebook pages, go on our websites. We're all here to help you, answer your questions, smooth your brow as it is, and help share the word of snus.
True. All right, everybody, have a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Have a good one, guys.